The story begins in a world that has long since vanished, a world described in the ancient book of Genesis. It tells of a time when humanity had grown distant from its creator, filling the earth with corruption. In this narrative, a man named Noah was found to be righteous and was given a monumental task. He was instructed to build a colossal vessel, an ark of immense proportions, designed not to sail the seas but to survive them. This ark was to become a sanctuary, a floating refuge for his family and for pairs of every kind of land-dwelling, air-breathing animal that walked the earth. It was a project of immense faith and staggering scale, undertaken in anticipation of a cataclysm the world had never known. The account describes a deluge of unimaginable power. For 40 days and 40 nights, rain fell relentlessly from the heavens, and the fountains of the great deep are said to have burst forth from the earth's crust. The waters rose steadily, unstoppably, until they covered everything. The highest mountains, the tallest trees, the sprawling plains, all were submerged beneath a global ocean. Every living thing on the dry land that was not aboard the ark perished in the rising tide. The world that had been was erased, its landscape scoured and its life extinguished, leaving only the ark, a solitary vessel adrift on the silent, boundless waters, carrying the seeds of a new beginning for life on earth. After many months, the waters began to recede. The ark, having weathered the storm, eventually came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. When Noah and his family finally emerged, they stepped out into a profoundly changed world. The landscape was new, washed clean and barren, waiting to be repopulated. The animals disembarked, ready to spread across the continents once more. This story of destruction and renewal is more than just an ancient tale. For many it serves as a foundational event in the history of our planet. It is seen not as a local inundation but as a global catastrophe that reshaped the very surface of the earth and reset the course of life itself. This dramatic narrative, passed down through millennia, offers a powerful explanation for the world we see around us. It speaks of a single world-altering event that could account for vast geological formations and the perplexing placement of fossils. For those who hold this view, the evidence is not found in slow, gradual processes over millions of years, but in the dramatic and rapid aftermath of this great cleansing flood. It is a perspective that challenges us to look at the rocks, the canyons and the bones buried within the earth, not as a story of slow time, but as the enduring legacy of a world that was once completely and utterly drowned. From the biblical account of a world-altering flood emerges a specific field of study known as flood geology. This is not a mainstream scientific theory, but a framework of interpretation held by many creationists. At its core, flood geology proposes that the Genesis flood was a literal, historical and global event of such immense power that it was the primary force responsible for creating most of the major geological features we observe on Earth today. This includes the vast sedimentary rock layers that stretch across continents, the towering mountain ranges, the deep canyons, and most significantly, the fossil record that is entombed within those rocks. It is a model built on the idea of a single year-long catastrophe. This perspective stands in stark contrast to the conventional geological timescale, where modern geology speaks of millions and even billions of years of slow incremental change. Flood geology compresses this entire process into a very short and violent period. The theory suggests that the pre-flood world was geologically and topographically different from our own. The cataclysmic event described in Genesis, with its torrential rains and subterranean water eruptions, would have unleashed unimaginable erosive power, turning the entire surface of the planet into a slurry of mud, rock and organic matter. This material, suspended in the turbulent waters, would then have settled out to form the layers of rock we now find all over the globe. According to this model, the processes that formed these geological strata were not slow and gentle, but rapid and violent. Huge torrents of water carrying immense sediment loads would have sorted materials by density and hydrodynamic properties, creating distinct layers in a matter of weeks or months, not eons. This rapid deposition would also explain the exquisite preservation of many fossils, as creatures would have been buried quickly and deeply, protecting them from scavenging and decay. From this viewpoint, the Grand Canyon, for example, is not the result of a small river carving through rock for millions of years, but the result of massive amounts of water draining off a continent in the final stages of the flood, carving the canyon in a very short time. Therefore, flood geology offers a comprehensive, albeit alternative, explanation for the Earth's crust. It is a theory of catastrophism, where one singular event holds the key to understanding almost everything we dig up and observe. The rocks are not a diary of deep time, but a tombstone for a buried world. The fossils are not a record of evolutionary descent over ages, but a snapshot of the ecosystems that were destroyed and entombed by the floodwaters. It reinterprets the geological column not as a timeline of ages, but as a sequence of burial zones corresponding to the different phases of a single globe-spanning inundation. In the world of mainstream geology, the prevailing principle for understanding Earth's history is quite different. It is a concept known as Uniformitarianism, famously summarized by the phrase, "The present is the key to the past." This idea, championed by geologists like James Hutton and Charles Lyell in the 18th and 19th centuries, suggests that the geological processes we observe happening today, erosion by wind and water, sedimentation in rivers and oceans, volcanic activity and the slow drift of continents, are the very same processes that have shaped our planet for billions of years. It is a philosophy of immense, deep time and gradual, consistent change. Uniformitarianism paints a picture of a planet in a state of constant, slow transformation. A canyon, from this perspective, is carved grain by grain over millions of years by the patient work of a river. Mountains are pushed up inch by inch over eons by the imperceptible collision of tectonic plates. Layers of sedimentary rock are formed as fine particles of sand and silt slowly settle at the bottom of ancient seas, compacting over vast timescales to become solid stone. This framework is the bedrock of modern geology, providing the foundation for dating rocks and interpreting the history they contain as a long and epic saga of planetary evolution. This principle directly opposes the catastrophic model of flood geology, where flood geology sees evidence of a single, rapid global event. Uniformitarianism sees the cumulative effect of countless small local events stretched out over an almost unimaginable expanse of time. The fossil record, in this view, is not a snapshot of a single year of destruction, but a fragmented library of life forms that have appeared, thrived and disappeared over hundreds of millions of years. Each layer of rock represents a different chapter in Earth's history, a different environment with its own unique inhabitants, all laid down in a slow and orderly sequence. The debate between these two models represents a fundamental clash of worldviews. Uniformitarianism operates on the premise that natural laws are constant, and that we can extrapolate from present-day observations to understand the distant past. It requires an acceptance of an ancient Earth, a concept supported by radiometric dating and other forms of scientific evidence. Flood geology, on the other hand, begins with a different premise, the historical accuracy of the Genesis account, and interprets the evidence through that lens. It argues that the present is not the key to the past, because the past contained a cataclysm of a scale and nature we do not witness today. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for an old Earth, according to mainstream geology, is the existence of vast layers of sedimentary rock. We see these layers, or strata, exposed in road cuts, canyons and mountainsides all over the world. The conventional view is that these layers were laid down slowly, one on top of another, over immense periods. A layer of sandstone might represent an ancient desert, while a layer of shale above it could signify a time when the area was a calm seabed. This geological column is read like a book, with the oldest chapters at the bottom and the newest at the top, chronicling billions of years of Earth's history. Flood geology offers a radically different interpretation of these same rock layers. Proponents argue that a global flood provides a much better mechanism for creating such vast, continent-spanning strata. They contend that it is difficult for slow, localized processes like a river delta or a small sea to lay down a single continuous layer of rock that can be traced for hundreds or even thousands of miles, as is sometimes observed. A global ocean, however, laden with trillions of tons of suspended sediment, could easily deposit massive uniform layers across huge areas as the material settled out of the turbulent water. In this model, the different types of rock do not represent different ages, but rather different stages of the flood. The initial, most violent phase might have ripped up bedrock and deposited coarse conglomerates. As the waters rose and currents shifted, different materials would have been sorted and deposited in a process called hydrodynamic sorting. Finer particles, like silts and clays that form shale, would have remained suspended longer and settled out on top of coarser sands. The entire geological column, from this perspective, is not a timeline of ages, but a hydraulic profile of a single, complex, year-long event, all formed in rapid succession. Furthermore, flood geologists point to features like polystrate fossils, fossilized trees that extend vertically through multiple rock layers, as evidence against slow deposition. If each layer represents thousands of years, they argue, the top of the tree would have rotted away long before it could be buried by the next layer. In the flood model, however, a tree could easily be buried upright by a massive, rapid influx of sediment in a single event. Thus, for believers in flood geology, the layers of rock are not a testament to the slow passage of time, but powerful evidence for the immense scale and rapid action of the Genesis flood. The fossil record, you see, is a vast and compelling library of past life with bones, shells and imprints of ancient creatures all locked away in stone. Now, the standard evolutionary interpretation, well, it places these fossils in a sequence of advancing complexity over hundreds of millions of years. Simple organisms are found in the lowest, oldest layers, while more complex creatures like mammals and birds are found in the higher, more recent layers. This ordering is seen as powerful evidence for evolution, charting the gradual development of life from simple origins to the diversity we see today. It tells a story of succession, of extinction, and of the slow emergence of new forms of life. But, flood geology interprets this same fossil evidence not as a record of evolution over time, but as a record of burial during a single cataclysm. The ordering of the fossils in the geological column is not seen as a temporal sequence, but as an ecological one. Proponents argue that the flood would have buried different ecosystems in a predictable order. The first to be inundated and buried would have been the slow-moving, bottom-dwelling creatures of the shallow pre-flood seas, which is why the lowest fossil-bearing layers are dominated by marine invertebrates like trilobites and shellfish. As the floodwaters rose, they would have progressively overwhelmed different ecological zones. Creatures living in coastal lowlands would be buried next, followed by those in upland forests and plains. This concept, known as ecological zonation, suggests that the perceived order in the fossil record reflects the sequence of burial of different environments. The more mobile and intelligent creatures, like mammals and birds, would have been able to flee to higher ground for a time, which explains why they are typically found in the uppermost layers, having been the last to be overcome by the rising waters. The sequence is therefore not about when they lived, but where they lived and how they died. From this perspective, the fossil record is a testament to widespread and rapid burial. The existence of massive fossil graveyards where thousands of creatures are found jumbled together is pointed to as evidence of a massive watery catastrophe rather than slow, gradual accumulation. The excellent preservation of many fossils, including soft tissues and delicate features, is also argued to be more consistent with sudden entombment in sediment, which would have protected the remains from scavengers and decay. So, in this view, the fossils are not a story of life's slow journey, but a tragic snapshot of a world and all its inhabitants perishing together in a global flood. Dinosaurs, they really do hold a special place in our collective imagination. And honestly, their existence and extinction pose some fascinating questions for any model of Earth's history. In the mainstream scientific view, dinosaurs dominated the planet for over 150 million years during the Mesozoic era, long before the first humans ever evolved. Their extinction about 66 million years ago is most commonly attributed to the impact of a massive asteroid, which in turn caused catastrophic climate change. The bones of these creatures are found in specific rock layers that correspond to that era, a testament, really, to their long reign and sudden demise. But flood geology, it incorporates dinosaurs into its framework in a very different way. In this model, dinosaurs weren't creatures of a distant prehistoric age, but were actually contemporary with humans living on the Earth before the Great Flood. They're seen as part of the vibrant pre-flood creation, a group of animals that Noah would have taken aboard the ark. The Bible mentions taking every kind of land animal, and from this perspective, that would have included representative pairs of the various dinosaur kinds. The massive fossilized dinosaurs we find today are believed by flood geologists to be the remains of those that did not make it onto the ark, and were, consequently buried by the floodwaters. The location and condition of dinosaur fossils are often cited as evidence for this scenario. They point to vast dinosaur graveyards like those in the Morrison Formation in North America, where countless bones from many different species are found, disarticulated and jumbled together. This, they argue, doesn't look like a creature dying and being slowly covered in its natural habitat. Instead, it looks like the result of a massive water catastrophe that swept away entire ecosystems, carrying the carcasses of animals for some distance before depositing them together in a huge sediment dump. The rapid burial, they say, would explain their preservation in such large numbers. After the flood, the story carries on. The dinosaurs that were saved on the ark would have disembarked into a new post-flood world. The environment, however, would have been drastically different and much harsher than the world they knew before. In this view, dinosaurs struggled to survive in the changed climate and faced increased competition for resources, which eventually led to their extinction sometime in the centuries or millennia after the flood. Stories and legends of dragons and great beasts from cultures all over the world are sometimes interpreted by creationists as historical accounts of human encounters with the last surviving dinosaurs. While the idea of a global flood is, ancient, the modern systematic framework of flood geology is actually a relatively recent development, largely shaped in the 20th century. One of the most influential figures in its popularization was a Canadian schoolteacher named George Macready Price, who wrote extensively in the early 1900s. He challenged the geological column, arguing that the sequence of fossils was, in his view, an artificial construct, and that the evidence pointed to a single major cataclysm. Price laid much of the intellectual groundwork for what would become the modern creationist movement, but his ideas remained on the fringes of public thought for quite a few decades. The turning point came in 1961 with the publication of a landmark book, The Genesis Flood. Co-authored by Dr. Henry M. Morris, a hydraulic engineer, and Dr. John C. Whitcomb, a theologian, this book synthesized decades of creationist thought into a comprehensive and accessible model. Morris, with his expertise in hydraulics, argued that the mechanics of a global flood were scientifically plausible and could account for the vast sedimentary deposits and the fossil record. The book was a sensation within conservative Christian circles, reigniting the creation-evolution debate and providing a scientific-sounding framework for believers to challenge mainstream geology. Dr. Henry Morris went on to become a central figure in the movement, co-founding the Institute for Creation Research in 1972. This organization became a hub for scientists and thinkers who sought to develop and promote the flood model. Figures like geologist Dr. Stephen Austin, also associated with the Institute, have conducted extensive field research to find evidence supporting a catastrophic interpretation of geological formations. Dr. Austin, for example, famously studied the eruption of Mount St. Helens, arguing that the rapid formation of canyons and layered deposits there demonstrated how massive geological change could happen quickly, providing a small-scale model for the global flood. These pioneers and their successors, such as those at organizations like Answers in Genesis, have worked to build a detailed alternative scientific paradigm based on a literal interpretation of Genesis. They publish journals, conduct research and operate museums, all with the goal of demonstrating that the evidence from the natural world can be interpreted to align with the biblical account of a young earth and a global flood. They see themselves not as rejecting science, but as practicing a different kind of science, one that starts from the axiom of biblical truth and seeks to understand the world from that foundation, challenging the philosophical naturalism that underpins the mainstream scientific consensus. The concept of a global flood as the primary architect of our planet's geology, it really does hold a powerful and enduring appeal for many people around the world. For individuals who hold the Bible as an infallible historical and spiritual authority, flood. Geology provides a way to harmonize their faith with the physical evidence they see in the world. It offers a cohesive narrative that affirms the literal truth of the Genesis account, resolving potential conflicts between Scripture and the conclusions of mainstream science. This allows faith and reason to coexist within a single unified worldview, where the rocks and fossils themselves become a testament to the power and judgment described in the Bible. This appeal isn't solely based on faith. It's also rooted in a desire for a comprehensive and, elegant explanation. The idea that one single monumental event can account for so many of the world's great mysteries, from the formation of the Grand Canyon to the extinction of the dinosaurs and the burial of the fossil record, is intellectually satisfying for some. It presents a grand unified theory of Earth's history that is both dramatic and profound. Proponents feel that it answers questions that, in their view, gradualism struggles with, such as the existence of continent-spanning rock layers and the exceptional preservation of certain fossils. Furthermore, the narrative of the flood carries deep moral and theological significance. It's a story of judgment on a corrupt world, but also a story of grace and salvation for Noah and his family. For believers, the geological evidence interpreted through this lens serves as a constant and physical reminder of this pivotal event in human history. The mountains, canyons, and fossil graveyards are not just inert features of a landscape, they are memorials to a past judgment and symbols of a new beginning. This imbues the natural world with a layer of meaning and purpose that a purely materialistic explanation might lack. Ultimately, accepting the flood geology model is often a decision rooted in one's foundational beliefs about the nature of truth and the origin of the world. It provides a framework that prioritizes divine revelation as a key to understanding the past, interpreting scientific data through the lens of that revelation. For millions, this perspective is not a rejection of evidence, but a different way of seeing and interpreting it. It offers a story of the Earth that is deeply intertwined with the story of humanity's relationship with its Creator, a narrative that continues to resonate powerfully in the modern world. It's crucial to understand that the interpretation of Earth's history offered by flood geology represents a minority view that stands outside the consensus of the global scientific community. The vast majority of working geologists, paleontologists, biologists, and physicists conclude that the evidence from multiple, independent fields of study overwhelmingly supports the model of an ancient Earth, shaped by uniformitarian processes and biological evolution over billions of years. They point to methods like radiometric dating, ice core data, genetic analysis, and stellar observation as mutually reinforcing lines of evidence for deep time. From the mainstream scientific perspective, the flood geology model faces, some pretty insurmountable challenges. Geologists argue that a single flood just can't account for the specific unvarying order of the fossil record found worldwide, nor can it explain geological features that require long periods of time, such as the slow cooling of igneous rock bodies, the formation of coral atolls, or the evidence of multiple successive ice ages. Furthermore, the sheer volume of water required for a global flood, the disposal of that water, and the survival of a diverse biosphere on an arc present immense physical and biological problems for which they argue no scientifically viable solutions have been proposed. This divergence, you see, highlights a fundamental difference in methodology and philosophy. Mainstream science operates on the principle of methodological naturalism, meaning it seeks to explain natural phenomena using only natural causes and observable laws without appealing to the supernatural. Flood geology, on the other hand, is rooted in a supernaturalist framework, where the actions of a divine being are considered a valid explanation for physical evidence. This represents a fundamental parting of the ways in how one approaches the quest for knowledge about the origins of our world. One path follows the evidence wherever it may lead within a natural framework. The other interprets the evidence through the lens of a sacred text. In the end, the story of the Earth is told through different voices, each with its own perspective on truth and history. The debate between flood geology and mainstream science is more than a simple disagreement over data. It's a reflection of the different ways humans make sense of their world and their place within it. Whether one sees the rocks and fossils as the product of a catastrophic global flood or as a diary of deep time, the quest to understand our planet's past remains a powerful and deeply human endeavour, driven by curiosity, wonder, and a desire to unravel the great mysteries written in the very foundations of the Earth.